to Deep Sleep Stories. Thank you to everyone who's been listening. If these stories help you relax or fall asleep, a short review, comment, or sharing the podcast with someone who might benefit is a simple and meaningful way to support the show so that we may continue to offer it for free. Now, take a slow, gentle breath and let's begin tonight's story.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a place where your day can gently loosen its grip and your mind can settle into quiet. Tonight you'll drift through a moonlit meadow where dandelion wishes rise like tiny lanterns on the breath of the wind. Let your body find a comfortable position, one that feels effortless. Allow your shoulders to soften, your jaw to unclench, your tongue to rest easily behind your teeth. If your hands are holding any tension, let them open a little, as if they're remembering how to be still. Breathe in slowly through your nose, as though you're sipping warm air. Pause for a moment and breathe out unhurried, letting your exhale be just a little longer than your inhale. Again, in, steady and smooth, and out, like a quiet tide returning to the sea. As you listen, you don't need to do anything at all. There's nothing to solve, nothing to plan, nowhere to go. The world can wait outside the door while you step into a softer place. Imagine yourself wrapped in a gentle calm, like a light blanket drawn up to your chin, the kind that makes your muscles sigh with relief. Now picture the air around you growing slightly cooler, like evening arriving. The sounds of the day fade, replaced by something simpler. Distant crickets, the hush of leaves, the faint whisper of wind passing over grass. With each breath, you sink deeper into comfort, and the story begins to carry you. And as you settle, the scene becomes clearer. An open meadow beneath a sky brushed with stars, where dandelions wait in pale clusters, their seeds poised like tiny wishes. The meadow lay at the edge of a small village that loved quiet things, slow mornings, warm bread, the steady work of hands that knew their craft, and evenings that arrived with a patient glow. Beyond the last cottage, past the gardens and the little orchard where apples grew round and sweet, the land opened into a field that seemed to belong to the sky. In spring and early summer, the meadow was scattered with bright yellow suns, dandelion blooms shining between blades of grass. Later, as the season softened, the yellow faded into airy spheres of white. Each one was a small universe of seeds, delicate and weightless, held together by an invisible kindness. On the evening the story begins, twilight had already spilled its lavender across the land. The day's warmth lingered in the earth, rising faintly as a comforting breath. The air smelled of clover and clean soil, and somewhere nearby, a stream murmured to itself over smooth stones, as if rehearsing a lullaby it had been singing for centuries. A young woman named Elowen walked slowly along the meadow's edge. She wasn't in a hurry. She rarely was, not when she came here. The village behind her had its gentle rhythms, but the meadow held a deeper quiet, a wider sort of peace that made thoughts grow spacious and soft. A Alawan carried a small lantern, though she hadn't lit it yet. The sky still offered enough light, and the moon, thin as a silver leaf, hung above the tree line like a careful promise. She wore a shawl that smelled faintly of lavender, and her footsteps made only the smallest sound, as if the grass welcomed them. She'd grown up with stories about this meadow. Elders spoke of it the way people speak of something beloved and mysterious, not with fear, but with reverence. They said the wind here listened better than elsewhere. They said dandelion wishes traveled farther, and sometimes, only sometimes, came back, changed into something real. No one claimed to understand exactly how it worked. The village did not need explanations for every gentle wonder. They simply knew that when people were tired in their bones or when their hearts felt heavy, the meadow could help. It was a place for quiet hopes. Small ones, tender ones, wishes made without demand, like offering a feather to the sky. Eowyn had not come to ask for something grand. She didn't even know what she would wish for, not yet. She had come because the day had been long, in the way that a day can be long even when nothing terrible happens. There had been errands and conversations, and a thin thread of worry that had followed her like a shy shadow. The kind of worry that didn't shout, only lingered, and made the mind feel crowded. The meadow, she hoped, would give her room to breathe. She walked toward the center of the field, where dandelions grew thickest. In the fading light, their seed heads glimmered like soft stars fallen to earth. Eowyn slowed further, letting her senses open the way a window opens to evening air. The grass brushed her ankles. A moth flickered past, pale and uncertain, then vanished into the dim. In the distance, an owl called once, a rounded sound that seemed to settle the world into place. Alawan found a patch of dandelions that looked especially luminous, and she sat down among them. She tucked her lantern beside her, unlit. The darkness, she realized, was not heavy. It was gentle. It was the kind of dark that wrapped around everything like velvet, making edges softer, making silence feel safe. She rested her palms on her knees and breathed in and out, letting her thoughts arrive and drift away without needing to chase them. In time, the wind arrived. Just a small breeze at first, gliding through the meadow with the careful touch of a hand smoothing a blanket. Dandelion seeds trembled on their stems. A few loosened and lifted into the air, as if they had been waiting for permission. Eowyn watched them float. Each seed carried a tiny umbrella of white filaments, perfectly made for drifting. They rose, turned, and wandered toward the sky, swaying as though they were dancing to music only they could hear. She smiled without trying. There was something comforting about that drifting, that trust. The seeds did not strain. They did not argue with the air. They simply went where they were carried. Eowyn reached toward the nearest dandelion puff. Her fingers were careful, as though she were touching something sacred. She pinched the stem gently and lifted it closer to her face. For a moment she hesitated, wishing could feel like effort if one tried too hard. But this meadow, she reminded herself, wasn't for forcing the future into shape. It was for letting a quiet hope take form, then releasing it. She closed her eyes. What did she want? Not a new life, not a sudden miracle. Just ease. A sense that she belonged to her own days. A gentler kind of sleep, a little more lightness. She didn't put the wish into words too tightly. She let it be a feeling, warm, soft, round at the edges. And then she breathed out. The dandelion seeds lifted and scattered, carrying her wish into the twilight. They rose like tiny comets, white and slow, swirling in the breeze. Eloan opened her eyes and watched them drift away. Something shifted in the air, subtle as the turning of a page. The wind moved differently for a moment, as if it had paused to listen. The grass hushed. The stream's murmur deepened, a richer tone like the low note of a cello. Then, from somewhere near the meadow's far side, a pale glow appeared. At first it was so faint, Eloan thought it might be a trick of dusk, but it brightened slowly, like a firefly, deciding to be brave. It hovered above the grass, no larger than a coin, then drifted closer in a gentle arc. Eloan did not feel afraid. The meadow's quiet wrapped around her like reassurance. She watched the glow approach, her breath steady, her hands resting calmly on her lap. The light floated nearer until it hovered just in front of her. It was not harsh. It was warm and soft, like candlelight behind frosted glass. Within it, a faint pattern shimmered. Tiny lines that resembled dandelion filaments, delicate and branching. The glow pulsed once as if greeting her. Eloan blinked slowly. "Hello," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if the light could hear sound the way people did. The glow drifted to the side, then forward, then back again. An unmistakable invitation. It wanted her to follow. Eloan looked over her shoulder at the village lights far behind her, small and steady, then turned back to the meadow's darker stretch. The glow waited, patient as the moon. She rose to her feet, brushing grass from her skirt. She lifted her lantern but did not light it. The little glow seemed enough, and besides, the meadow's magic felt like something that preferred dimness and quiet. She took one step, then another. The glow floated ahead, never too far, always within gentle reach. Together they moved through the meadow, weaving between clusters of dandelions, their seed heads shining faintly like pearls. The wind followed as a companion, tugging softly at Eloan's shawl and combing through the grass. As she walked, she noticed other glimmers, tiny lights scattered at the edges of her vision. They winked in and out among the dandelions as if the meadow held more secrets than she'd ever guessed. The glow guiding her drifted toward a small rise in the land, a hillock that Eloan had seen from afar but never climbed. It was covered in thick grass and dotted with dandelions so dense they looked like a pale constellation spilled across green velvet. At the top of the rise stood an old stone circle. Eloan's breath caught, not with fear, but with wonder. The stones were not tall, only as high as her shoulders, but they were ancient, rounded by time, and softened with moss. They formed a ring, impervious perfect and welcoming, like a gathering of elders leaning close to share a story. The guiding glow floated between two stones and waited. Elowen stepped into the circle. The air inside was different, still thick with quiet. The sounds of the meadow became distant, as if muffled by invisible curtains. Even the stream's murmur softened to a hush. The guiding glow rose higher, hovering above the circle's center. Elowen's gaze followed it, and she noticed something at her feet. A single dandelion growing in the middle of the stones. It was larger than any she'd ever seen, its seed head full and luminous, perfectly round. It seemed to hold moonlight in its filaments. Each seed was distinct, each one like a tiny wand tipped with a soft white star. Elowen knelt beside it. The guiding glow pulsed again, brighter this time, and the air stirred with the faintest whisper, like a voice speaking without words. Elowen placed her hand near the giant dandelion, not quite touching. The plant did not sway. It stood perfectly still, as though waiting. In Elowen's mind, images began to form, slow and gentle, like clouds shaping themselves. She saw a path of pale seeds drifting over water, leading to a place she had never visited. She saw a door made of woven branches and dandelion stems. She saw a valley wrapped in mist, where the air shimmered with floating lights. She breathed in softly, and the images became clearer. This was not a command, it was an invitation, like the glow had offered before, a chance to step into a place of wishes. Elowen's heart felt strangely light. She thought of the wish she had released, a wish for ease, for softer sleep, for gentler days. Perhaps the meadow had heard, perhaps the wind had carried her hope somewhere it could be tended. She leaned closer to the giant dandelion and very gently breathed out. The seeds lifted. Not all at once, but in a slow, spiraling dance. They rose around Elowen like a snowfall in reverse, circling her, brushing her hair and shawl without weight. The guiding glow brightened, joining the swirl, and the air inside the stone circle began to shimmer. Elowen felt a soft pressure like standing in warm water. The world blurred at the edges, the stones, the meadow, the moonlit sky. Everything softened as though painted in watercolors. Left in gentle rain, she kept breathing, slow and steady. And then, as easily as stepping from one room into another, she found herself somewhere else. She stood on a path made of pale earth that glittered faintly, as if powdered with stardust. On either side, tall grasses swayed in a breeze that smelled of honey and clean rain. Above, the sky was not quite night and not quite day. An endless twilight, with a moon that seemed closer, larger, like a lantern hung low. Dandelion seeds floated everywhere, drifting in lazy spirals. Some hovered as if deciding where to go. Others traveled in little streams of light, following currents Elowen couldn't see. Ahead, a valley opened wide, cradled by gentle hills. Mist pooled in the low places like cream in a bowl. and scattered through that mist were lights, dozens, hundreds, soft glows like the one that had guided her. Elowen took a careful step forward. The path felt springy under her feet like moss. The air hummed with quiet energy, not loud enough to disturb, only enough to soothe. A glow floated close, then another. They circled her slowly, as if curious. Their light brushed her cheeks with warmth, like sunlight through thin curtains. Elowen smiled again, her body relaxing without effort. She followed the path down into the valley. As she walked, she noticed shapes in the mist, small shelters made of woven grasses and slender branches, each one rounded like a bird's nest. They were arranged in gentle clusters, with little openings that glowed softly from within. The valley looked like a village, but not one made for people. It felt made for something lighter. Elowen paused near the nearest shelter. Its doorway was arched, lined with dandelion stems braided into a delicate frame. Inside, she could see a small room lit by floating glows. The floor was covered in soft seed down, like the fluff inside a pillow. In the center rested a bowl carved from pale wood, filled with something that looked like dew. The air carried the faint scent of chamomile. Elowen leaned closer, and the dew in the bowl trembled, forming tiny ripples. Within those ripples, she saw images, fleeting and soft. A child's face smiling as they ran through summer grass. A baker sliding warm loaves onto a shelf. An old woman wrapping a scarf around someone's shoulders. A cat curled in a patch of sunlight. They were small, ordinary moments, and yet they glowed with a kind of sweetness that made Elowen's chest feel tender. She understood, somehow, that these were wishes, not dramatic ones, but quiet hopes for comfort, for kindness, for safety, for rest. The valley was holding them. Elowen stepped back and continued walking deeper into the mist-lit place. The floating glows moved with her, guiding her gently like patient companions. Soon she came to a clearing where the mist thinned. In the center stood a tree. It was an old tree, broad and graceful, with branches that arched outward like welcoming arms. But its leaves were unusual. They were not green or gold. They were pale and shimmering, like dandelion filaments gathered into leaf shapes. The tree seemed made of the same softness as wishes. From its branches hung hundreds of tiny seed puffs, each one glowing faintly. They swayed in the breeze, brushing against one another with the softest whisper. Elowen approached the tree, her steps slowing as if the air itself asked for reverence. The floating glows gathered around the trunk, circling like fireflies in a garden. At the base of the tree was a small hollow, like a doorway carved naturally into the wood. Inside the hollow, a deeper light glimmered, steady and calm. Elowen knelt and looked inside. She expected to see a nest, or perhaps a pool of light. Instead, she saw a small figure sitting within the hollow, as though it had always belonged there. It was not a person, not exactly. It was something delicate and luminous, shaped like a child made of mist and moonlight. Its hair looked like wisps of dandelion fluff drifting gently around its head. Its eyes were dark and kind, like deep water reflecting stars. The figure regarded Elowen with quiet curiosity. Elowen's breath remained calm. She felt no fear, only a sense of being seen in a gentle way. The figure lifted a hand. In its palm rested a single dandelion seed, bright as a tiny pearl. Without speaking, it offered the seed to Elowen. Elowen reached out and the seed floated from the figure's hand into hers, landing softly on her palm. It weighed nothing. It felt like holding the idea of lightness. As soon as the seed touched her skin, warmth spread through her fingers, up her hand, and into her chest. It was a comforting warmth, like a cup of tea sipped slowly on a quiet night. In Elowen's mind, a thought appeared, not in words, but in understanding. This was a wish keeper, a tender guardian of all the small hopes people released into the wind. It did not judge wishes by size or importance. It held them all with the same care. Elowen looked at the seed in her palm and sensed that it was connected to her own wish, the one she'd breathed into the meadow. Not a command, not a demand, a soft request for ease. The wish-keeper watched her, patient. Elowen closed her fingers gently around the seed, as if protecting it from harshness. She breathed in, slow and deep, and as she exhaled, her shoulders dropped a little more. Her mind, which had been full of thin worries, began to empty like a bowl, being gently rinsed. The wish keeper tilted its head, as though listening to the sound of Elowen's breath. Then it extended its hand again and pointed, not sharply but softly, toward a path that curved around the tree. Elowen rose and followed. The path led to a pond, round and still, nestled beneath the tree's outer branches. The water was dark, but not frightening. It looked like polished obsidian reflecting the twilight sky. Dandelion seeds floated on the surface like tiny boats. Around the pond, the ground was covered in thick moss that felt like velvet underfoot. The air smelled of rain and wild flowers. A breeze moved over the water, creating delicate ripples that traveled outward in perfect circles. Elowen sat down at the pond's edge. The floating glows drifted close, hovering above the water like a canopy of small moons. Their reflections shimmered below, doubling the light. Elowen opened her hand and looked at the seed again. It glowed faintly, pulsing in time with her breath. She wondered what she should do with it. The pond answered not with words, but with a gentle change. The water's surface became clearer, as if inviting her to look deeper. Elowen leaned forward. In the pond she saw herself, not as a mirror would show, but as a memory might. She saw the way she carried her days, sometimes gripping them too tightly. She saw her thoughts racing ahead, trying to prepare for every possible problem. She saw the tiredness that lived behind her eyes when she pretended she wasn't tired. But the pond did not show these things to shame her. It showed them with compassion. like a friend saying softly, "It's all right. You can rest." In the water, another image appeared. Aloan asleep, peaceful, her face smooth with calm. Around her bed, dandelion seeds drifted like protective snow, settling gently on the windowsill, the blanket, the floor, turning the room into a quiet sanctuary. Elowen felt her throat tighten slightly, not with sadness, but with relief. She wanted that peace. She let her hand hover above the pond, holding the seed over the water. Very gently, she opened her fingers. The seed dropped, touching the pond's surface without making a splash. It floated for a moment, glowing brighter, then slowly dissolved into a thread of light that sank beneath the surface. The pond's glow deepened, and a ripple spread outward, widening in calm circles. As the ripple reached the pond's edges, Aloan felt the same calm move through her body, like the ripple had traveled into her bones. Her breath became slower, softer. The floating glows drifted in closer, surrounding her with warm light. The Wish-Keeper's presence was nearby, felt rather than seen, an attentive quiet that asked nothing from her. Aloan sat for a long time, simply breathing and watching the pond. The mist around the valley moved in slow waves. Dandelion seeds continued to drift, rising and falling like gentle snow. In that stillness, Elowen began to notice small sounds she hadn't heard before. The faint chime of seeds brushing one another, the whisper of moss as the breeze passed over it, the soft hum of the tree as though it were singing without a melody. The valley seemed alive with lullabies. Her eyelids grew heavier, but she did not fight it. She allowed the heaviness to be pleasant, like sinking into a warm bed. The Wish-Keeper appeared again at the edge of her vision, standing quietly near the tree. It watched her with calm eyes. In its presence, Elowen felt the permission to rest, to loosen her grip on everything she'd been holding. Eventually, Elowen stood and wandered a little more, moving slowly along the pond's edge. Each step felt like a gentle rocking motion. The moss cushioned her feet. The air wrapped around her like a soft shawl. She passed more shelters, each one glowing with a dim interior light. In one, she saw a tiny arrangement of petals and seeds, like an offering. In another, she saw a small pile of smooth stones, each one etched faintly with a symbol that reminded her of wind. She didn't need to understand, she simply absorbed the feeling of care embedded in everything. At the far side of the valley, she found a low hill covered in dandelions at every stage. Yellow blooms, pale puffs, and scattered seeds drifting above them all. The hill looked like a place where the wind liked to play. Elowen climbed it slowly. The path wound in gentle curves, never steep and never demanding. Halfway up, she turned and looked back. From this height, she could see the Wish Valley spread below, the shimmering tree, the dark pond, the mist glowing with floating lights. It looked like a hidden cradle for hopes, tucked between worlds. Aloan felt her heart expand with gratitude she didn't have to name. She reached the top of the hill and sat down among the dandelions. Here, the wind was a little stronger, but still gentle. It tugged softly at her hair and carried the scent of wild flowers past her nose. All around her, seeds drifted upward, catching the light like tiny stars. Aloan watched them, and her thoughts began to drift as well, not in a scattered way, more like a leaf floating on water. She imagined each seed carrying a wish, traveling through dark and light, through quiet and change, until it found the place it needed to go. She wondered how many wishes had passed through this valley. How many people in their own worlds had stood in a meadow and breathed hope into the air. And she realized that wishes did not always need to become grand realities. Sometimes a wish could simply become a softer moment, a deeper breath, a calmer night, a gentle ease that arrived quietly like dawn. The wind brushed past her again. Aloan closed her eyes. In her mind, she returned to the meadow near her village. She could feel the grass under her feet, the cool evening air on her cheeks. She could hear the stream and the crickets. She could see the moon, thin and silver. She sensed that the valley of wishes would remain hidden and steady, holding hopes like seeds in a safe palm. Aloan breathed in and out. The world shimmered, and then she was back in the stone circle, kneeling beside the giant dandelion. The guiding glow hovered above her, softer now, as if satisfied. The meadow's sounds returned, the stream's murmur, the faint rustle of grass, the distant call of an owl. Aloan rose slowly, feeling different. Not dramatically changed, but gently rebalanced, like a room after someone has opened a window and let fresh air in. She looked down at the giant dandelion. Its seed head was still full, though a small portion had released. It glowed faintly, steady as moonlight. Aloan bowed her head slightly, a quiet thank you without words. The guiding glow drifted to the side, then upward, and slowly faded into the night, as if returning to wherever such lights belonged. Aloan stepped out of the stone circle. The air outside felt a little cooler, but also clearer. The meadow stretched around her, silvered by moonlight. Dandelion puffs gleamed like soft lanterns scattered across the grass. She began to walk back toward the village. Her steps were slow and easy. Her shoulders were relaxed. The thin thread of worry that had followed her earlier had loosened, trailing behind like a ribbon slipping free. Above, the sky seemed wider than before, the stars more patient. The wind followed her, gentle and companionable, as if it wanted to walk her home. As Aloan approached the meadow's edge, she noticed something small and bright on the path ahead. A single dandelion seed lay on the ground, glowing faintly like a tiny ember. She paused and knelt, lifting it carefully between her fingers. It was warm, like it held a little bit of the Wish Valley's light. Elowen smiled. She didn't need to keep it forever. She didn't need to pin it down or trap it. But for now, she held it, letting it remind her of softness, of release, of the way the wind could carry what was heavy. She tucked the seed into the fold of her shawl near her collarbone, close to her heart, where it could rest. Then she continued home, the village lights growing brighter ahead. The cottages were quiet. Windows glowed with lamplight. Somewhere a door clicked softly as someone settled in for the night. The scent of hearth smoke drifted through the air, comforting and familiar. Elowen stepped into her home and closed the door behind her. The quiet inside greeted her like a friend. She set her lantern on the table, though she still didn't light it. Moonlight poured through the window, enough to see by, enough to make everything look gentle. She moved through her small evening routine slowly, like a ritual of kindness. She washed her hands in cool water. She drank a sip of warm tea. She folded her shawl carefully and placed it over a chair, feeling the seed hidden within like a small secret of light. When she finally lay down in her bed, she pulled the blanket up and let her body sink into the mattress. Outside, the wind moved through the village, brushing over rooftops and trees, traveling onward toward the meadow. It carried with it the faintest shimmer of dandelion filaments, unseen but present, like a blessing. Elowen closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw the Wish Valley again, the shimmering tree, the dark pond, the floating glows like small moons. But the images were soft, dreamlike, not demanding attention. Her breathing slowed, the edges of her thoughts blurred, as if covered in gentle mist. Now the story begins to soften, like a light dimming in a quiet room. Elowen sleeps peacefully in her small cottage, and the wind keeps watch outside. The meadow rests under moonlight. Dandelion puffs sway faintly, their seeds held close until the moment comes to drift. The Wish Valley, hidden somewhere between breath and dream, continues to cradle quiet hopes. It holds them without hurry. It warms them with gentle light. It lets them become what they need to be, sometimes a change, sometimes a comfort, sometimes simply a deep, easy rest. The wind moves slowly. It crosses the fields. It glides over the stream. It passes through the meadow and lifts a few seeds into the air, just a few, drifting upward like tiny lanterns. Everything is calm. Everything is safe. Your breathing can be slow now, smooth and steady. In and out, like a tide. The muscles of your face soften, your shoulders sink. Your thoughts float farther apart, leaving wide spaces of quiet between them. Any worry tries to return. It can drift away like a seed on the wind, carried gently out into the night. The meadow remains. The moon remains. The soft, shimmering wishes rise and wander and settle. And you can settle too, deeper and deeper, as sleep comes closer, warm and welcoming. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.